The Poco F4 GT and OnePlus 10 Pro. Two phones that are more similar than they are different. But in this case, the differences actually matter. In fact, if these phones were animals, the F4 GT would be a leopard, the 10 Pro a racehorse. I'll explain. Are they fast? Absolutely. I have no complaints when it comes to navigating the interface and opening apps on either device. Most of the time, they're equally quick since both devices are powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 with LPDDR5 RAM and UFS 3.1 storage. Both also have speedy fingerprint unlocking, with the GT using a side-mounted reader and the OnePlus an optical in-display sensor. I did have to enroll the same fingers twice on the 10 Pro, and even after a recent Oxygen OS update that improved its fingerprint unlocking, the Poco's side-mounted scanner is still consistently more accurate and dependable. Even so, I prefer in-display sensors, so the racehorse wins for me. For benchmarks, they're similar enough that you won't be able to notice much, if any, difference in day-to-day performance. The F4 GT wins easily in single core and basically ties the 10 Pro's multi-core score in Geekbench. Both devices also tie in 3D Mark Wildlife. So yeah, of course, leopards and racehorses are fast. Where the big difference comes in is stamina. The Poco Leopard is just as quick, if not quicker, than the racehorse in short bursts, but the OnePlus racehorse will outrun any leopard over long distances, which is what the CPU throttling test and 3D Mark's Wildlife Unlimited stress test show. After a 30-minute throttling test, the 10 Pro easily sustains higher performance, only throttling down to 76% of its max, while the F4 GT struggles, quickly dipping to 61% of its max performance. Unfortunately, the trend continues with the very tired leopard cutting its 3D Mark Wildlife loop score in half, from 10,066 to 4619 during the Wildlife Unlimited stress test. The racehorse looked a little sleepier here, but even so, it easily beats the leopard and never dips below 6333. Plus, it was much more stable than the Poco. If you're worried about heat, both devices certainly were warm to the touch after these tests, but neither were uncomfortable. 3D Mark shows that the OnePlus is getting 2 degrees warmer, but I think that's perfectly acceptable since performance is still consistent. As for gaming performance, app loading times are nearly identical. In-game performance is also very similar. But of course, we can't talk about gaming without checking out the retractable triggers on the F4 GT, which is another difference between the leopard and the racehorse. This leopard can pounce, so I fired up Wordle. Just kidding. We need something demanding to really test this gaming phone out. Quirtle! But seriously, the triggers are a nice addition. I just don't game much, so I ended up mapping them with a few other actions, like opening the camera and turning on the flashlight. If you're still wondering how the leopard can game after seeing the throttling earlier, yeah, for my limited testing, it's actually fine. I played Asphalt for a little over a half an hour and still couldn't notice any big drops in performance on either device. So clearly the stress tests aren't telling the whole story. But which has the better screen? Definitely the 10 Pro. It's brighter with a peak of 1300 nits, an AMOLED LTPO 2.0 display that saves battery life by adaptively refreshing up to 120 Hz and down to 1 Hz, and a QHD resolution for its slightly larger 6.7-inch curved display. It's a really pretty racehorse. That's not to say the Poco screen is bad, it's just not as premium as the 10 Pros. Both have a gaming-friendly touch sampling rate of 480 Hz, Gorilla Glass Victus protection, and are viewable on a sunny day. For camera performance, you might be surprised to hear that racehorses and leopards can both take great photos. If you want to see my full camera comparison, check it out in the link below. But basically, the OnePlus has a better overall camera system with some excellent features in its stock camera app, but the F4 GT's main camera competes very well, especially if you install a free Gcam port. Just don't expect 8K video, 4K video at 120 FPS, or decent ultra-wide and macro shots from the Poco. The racehorse is more versatile, but the leopard can keep up, just not at every race. Audio is another area where both phones are similar. The F4 GT sounds a bit better with more bass, but both phones are plenty loud, even in a noisy room. Unfortunately, neither have a headphone jack, but Bluetooth connectivity has been perfect. Charging speed is one of the best things about both of these devices. The Poco charges at a ridiculous 120 watts, and the OnePlus a still very fast 80 or 65 watts depending on your region. Thankfully, both come with their chargers in the box. I was able to charge the Poco from 1 to 100% in 18 minutes, the OnePlus 31 minutes. Now that may sound considerably slower, but the racehorse has a larger battery at 5000 milliamp hours and can easily outlast the leopard's full day and a little more battery life by lasting at least a day and a half, and sometimes 2 days. Also, if you don't want to plug in your phone, the OnePlus has you covered with speedy 50-watt wireless charging, which is not an option for the Poco. Software is kind of a tie for these phones. Both are quick and pretty stable, but neither provide a clean version of Android. The Leopard is running MIUI for Poco, and it might get updated for 3 years, but that's not guaranteed. The Racehorse is guaranteed Oxygen OS updates for 3 years, but there are substantial changes coming to its current OS version that might be great in terms of returning to the fast and clean approach that OnePlus took before they began shipping Oppo's Color OS on their devices, but it could also turn out to be pretty messy, as OnePlus has just not been able to properly optimize their OS updates for the last few years. I'm using third-party launchers on each device so that I can place folders in my app drawer, and OnePlus allows gesture navigation to work properly with launchers like Nova, where Poco just does not. I actually did figure out a workaround and some other customization settings to get gesture navigation almost back to normal, which if anyone is interested in seeing, I'm happy to make a video about it. Ultimately, I do prefer OnePlus's Oxygen OS, even with its uncertain future, since it's a bit simpler and more flexible than MIUI on the Poco. Both the Leopard and Racehorse are pretty comfortable to hold, but I absolutely prefer the 10 Pro's rounded edges and its alert slider, which makes silencing your phone so much easier. While the F4 GT's triggers can be used to silence your phone, it's just not the same. Oh, and the triggers do sit surprisingly flat against the frame, especially if you use the included case, but I did manage to occasionally activate them when pulling the phone out of my pocket. Also, I noticed that if the triggers weren't closed, they would rattle when my phone was set to vibrate. Not a big issue, just something I wanted to note. Also, the vibration motor that the Leopard has is amazing. The haptics are just so strong and precise. Conveniently, the haptics on the Racehorse are just a step behind the Poco. Still excellent. And if you're into notification lights, the F4 GT has them, but I never see them since I don't lay my phone screen down, because that's crazier than a Racehorse Leopard race. One last note, Jerry Rig Everything was able to snap the 10 Pro in half, but I've not had any issues with bending, and I'm not worried about the build quality of the Racehorse. I mean, it's a racehorse. The Poco has an IP53 rating, and the T-Mobile OnePlus model has an IP68 rating, which means that though the global 10 Pro version doesn't officially have an IP rating, I feel pretty safe saying that it's also protected against dust and water. My recommendation really depends on the price in your region and how important gaming features are to you. If you're looking for the value option, the Poco's the way to go, since it's probably the cheapest flagship phone available at the time of recording. In the States, the prices are much closer than they are globally, so I would actually suggest picking up the 10 Pro instead, as long as gaming is not your deciding factor. Either way, if you think the 10 Pro or F4 GT is the right phone for you, you should check out Wireless Place, since they have OnePlus and Poco devices, as well as phones from Xiaomi, Samsung, Motorola, and more. I've bought a few phones from Wireless Place, and they always ship fast and internationally, have great prices, plus they include a US adapter for the charger if you need it. Please use my discount code PC10 when you check out. If you want to support the channel or just want to save a little money, a link to the site is in the description. Please subscribe if you want to see more content like this, and leave a comment with any questions you might have, and I will answer them perfectly, ingeniously.